Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here with us today because today, well, we're stepping into a pretty fascinating laboratory. We're going to be doing what I like to call literary forensics. I want you to think of a poem not just as some pretty picture hanging on a wall, but as an active crime scene, a place where every single word, every line break, and every metaphor, they're all clues left behind for us to examine. Does a poem ever mean what it actually says? It's incredibly tempting to think so, right? We read a line, we extract a literal fact, and boom, we move on. But as we're going to uncover in our investigation today, that obvious surface-level interpretation is almost always a brilliant illusion. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today's investigation. First, beyond literal meaning. Second, Barry's three-step model. Third, deconstructing digital memories. Fourth, the primacy of the signifier. Fifth, constructing symbolic worlds, and finally, the endless search for meaning. And hey, please don't worry if some of these sound like dense academic frameworks. I promise, this roadmap is going to guide us safely through all of it without anyone getting lost. Starting off with Section 1, Beyond Literal Meaning. This is where we establish that language is inherently unstable and meaning is literally meant to be dismantled. To truly master literary forensics, we've got to start with this foundational premise. Our golden rule for the day is this. Words are unstable clues. Meaning is constructed. It is not simply found. It's kind of a running joke that literary theorists love absolutely nothing more than proving that nothing means what you think it means. But honestly, there's a really profound truth to that. We aren't just politely reading texts today to uncover some hidden message. No, we're going to figure out how the message itself was built by exposing all of its cracks. Moving to Section 2, Barry's three-step model, drawn straight from his book, Beginning Theory. To do this effectively, we need our very first forensic tool, which is deconstruction. Basically, this means reading a text against itself. The whole goal here is to reveal contradictions, instability, and multiple meanings, rather than just settling for one fixed, boring interpretation. We aren't just reading poetry today. We are actively tearing it down to see exactly how the linguistic gears work under the hood. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact method we'll be using, Barry's three-step model. Step 1 is the verbal stage. That's where we hunt down paradoxes in the text. Step 2 is the textual stage, where we track wild shifts in focus and look for structural gaps. And Step 3 is the linguistic stage, where we expose the fundamental instability of the language itself. We're going to move fast through these 3 layers, literally just like an active on-the-ground investigation. That brings us to Section 3, deconstructing digital memories. So, grab your magnifying glass. It is time to apply our brand new tool to our very first case. We are going to deconstruct a really fascinating poem titled When Memory Learns to Breathe. Listen closely to this excerpt. The library now breathes through streams of light. Each dataset remembers someone's life. The brightest server cannot dream alone. Notice those distinct action words? Breathes, remembers, dream. Let's isolate those specific clues for Step 1 of Barry's model. Notice the comparison we're making here. On one side, we have physical, deeply human actions, right? Breathing, dreaming, remembering. But on the other side, we have cold, abstract digital entities, memory, servers, datasets. Do you see the friction there? This is our verbal stage paradox. The poem is instantly contradicting its own literal reality by giving living, breathing human qualities to cold technology. Language is already actively resisting a single, straightforward meaning. Now we hit the textual stage. Look at how the poem's perspective just wildly shifts around. Stanza 1 is all about celebrating this massive digital expansion of knowledge. But then stanza 2 suddenly pivots away from that, focusing instead on the hidden human face behind the graphs. By stanza 3, it shifts again, arguing that while tech can preserve data, only humans can provide wisdom. And notice the massive structural gap at the end. The poem leaves us with huge, unanswered questions. Whose memories are actually being preserved in the system? What gets left out entirely? These constant shifts and structural gaps completely block us from settling on one fixed interpretation. So, the crucial point is what happens in our third step, the linguistic stage. Take a totally common word like library. Notice how it shifts from being a physical building made of bricks and walls to a boundless, invisible digital archive. Words in this poem like light, voices, soul, they're constantly shifting in meaning, depending entirely on how you look at them. They continually defer the truth. Ultimately, the poem just ends up deconstructing its own message, basically proving that while digital systems might store the data, human interpretation is what actually gives it meaning. On to Section 4, The Primacy of the Signifier, a concept by Catherine Belsey. We've officially cracked the first case. Now, let's shift our investigation over to our second forensic framework. Catherine Belsey argues for the primacy of the signifier. That means meaning is produced through the interaction of signifiers, like words and images, creating multiple associations, rather than directly pointing to some external reality. Just like Ezra Pound's famous poem In a Station of the Metro, or William Carlos Williams's The Red Wheelbarrow, our next poem doesn't just describe the real world. Instead, it uses language to build a completely symbolic one from scratch. Let's look at this second case, a poem called The Weight of Waiting. It kicks off with this incredibly powerful excerpt. We built our days from promises of dawn, yet every sunrise left the question bare. Instantly, we are thrown into a deep existential tension. This isn't just a literal description of morning. Something much heavier and much more abstract is going on. Let's move into Section 5, Constructing Symbolic Worlds. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how brilliantly it maps out the way these idealized words detach from reality. We're dismantling how this poem creates that heavy feeling by analyzing how its words interact. The signifier dawn literally just means morning, sure, but symbolically, it associates with hope and new beginnings. Silence isn't merely an absence of noise. It represents the unknown, the big unanswered question. Journey isn't a road trip. It's a metaphor for human existence and the search for purpose. These words completely detach from reality and literally force us, the readers, to make unexpected associations. Take a look at the tension created by this. We've got promises of dawn, giving us this feeling of expectation and hope, but immediately it's undercut by sunrise left the question bare, delivering straight-up unanswered uncertainty. The signifiers dawn and sunrise completely lose their literal sunny morning certainty. Instead of telling us the time of day, they become clashing symbols of tension that actively undermine each other. And the plot definitely thickens with these lines. We named the stars believing names were truth, but silence wore the oldest face of all. Think about what Belsey is really arguing here. Language, our deeply human act of naming things, is our attempt to give order to a chaotic universe. We so desperately want names to be truth. But the contrast with silence proves that language ultimately falls short. Silence is older, it's more powerful. It proves language simply cannot fully explain reality. But hey, poetry isn't just about the rigid definitions of words, right? It's also about how those words feel. And that brings us to the semiotic dimension. Drawing on theorist Julia Kristeva, Belsey notes that rhythm, repetition, and movement words like roads, step, roam, they create this flowing feeling of endless searching. The poem's beautifully balanced lines produce a visceral emotional experience that entirely bypasses logical meaning. As I read those lines, you can literally feel the endless, restless movement of the search through the rhythm itself. And here we are at Section 6, the endless search for meaning. We're officially entering the final phase of our investigation. Time to bring our closing arguments to the table and synthesize exactly what we've uncovered using both Barry's and Belsey's forensic tools. Let's read the concluding lines of our second poem. If no one writes the ending we pursue, then every step becomes a birth anew. Wow, it is a profound realization. These signifiers, ending and birth, they aren't looked into one strict definition. They remain beautifully, wonderfully open. Is this a poem about the terrifying burden of responsibility or the absolute thrill of freedom? The words themselves don't give us the final answer. They just provide the symbolic space for us to explore it. Let's move to and see how this builds our final verdict. What has literary forensics actually taught us today? Well, words hide contradictions and multiple meanings. Poetry constructs symbolic worlds rather than simply reflecting reality. Meaning isn't found, it is actively constructed. And the absolute most important variable in this entire equation? It's you. The reader is the final variable. Just like that digital server waiting for a mind, these poems are just waiting for you to give their data a soul. We've seen just how unstable yet beautifully open language can be today. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought-provoking question to investigate on your own time. If meaning isn't fixed in poetry, how are you actively constructing the meaning of your own daily life?